Wait for them all to get on. There's the sheesh. There they all come. Come on, guys, get on. Share. Get all. Everybody wants to hear what happens tonight. I'll give you a few moments to share. We got Sir Kyl Cobb on tonight. Hey, Karen. What's up, Big Lyman? You all go on and share. Everybody. Chris, my man, what's up? Go on and share this bad boy. Everybody wants to hear what's going on tonight. No, that's ES World on Fire, called Sightless in Shadows. Hello, baby Dane. Get on there and share. Let's see if we can boost this up, because everybody needs to hear what's going on tonight. Hi, Cat. Cat's on. There you go. Everybody's going on. Pump it up, guys. Poor Kyle. He's like, what's wrong with this crazy man? Not much, Chris, my man. Hey, Candy, how are you? You all come on in. You all want to hear anything? You got to hear about this. Hey, Faith, come on in. Go on and share. Share it to all to your friends real quick. They want to hear what's going on. There's Jake. Jake's on Will. Jake's on call. I seen Will and I was like, Jake's on Will. I was like, okay. Hey, Melissa. There we go. Y'all go on and share. Share it real quick. We're about ready to start. Tell Stacy I said hi. Give a kiss to baby boo. There you go. Doing awesome, guys. Doing awesome. I love it. You all are the best. Hi. That's Mom-in-law. Welcome, Paranormal Freaks. I'm your host, Mike, and this is Paranormal Highways, which you are watching. Today, guys, I'm skipping over a few things. If you want to know his little biography about Kyl, it's on audio. Go back and listen to it. It's absolutely fantastic. But I talked to Kyl this weekend, and he has blown my mind at some of the things he's told me. And I was like, man, I think everybody really, really needs to hear this. So I want everybody to give a big welcome to Sir Kyl Cobb. Welcome to the show, Sir Kyl Cobb.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Once again, I can say this time we're doing video. I remember a man telling me one time, says, man, you really need to get video.
A wise sage.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, man. I mean, I'm always intrigued at everything that you have to say. But let's get started here and get these people just a warning. I advertised about Lorraine Warren. I advertised. Well, I didn't say Lorraine. I said the Warrens. I said something about uh, I
I
can't
think
say.
Michael.
Yes. Thank you for sharing. I didn't want to explode and kill the name there at first, but it's kind of, have you heard behind the stories, and this is what are behind the scenes of all this, and we'll get to that. But first, you told me about something that came in. You said that's actually shipped this, today, that's coming to you, that uh, they want you to. Well, I'll let you tell it. Go ahead, Kyle.
Well, I get lots and lots of calls. I average about 200 inquiries a month from folks looking for help. Sometimes it's because they think they have something demonic going on. Sometimes it's because they have a haunted object or just general paranormal questions. And as one of the byproducts of that, inevitably one of the things that I get are people giving me their haunted and or cursed items to eliminate, to break the attachment or destroy. And it just happens that what I was talking to you about off air was I actually have a whole crate of objects being shipped to me. Um, there was a person who is currently in possession of them, where her ex apparently was a paranormal enthusiast, but also dabbled in the occult and a little bit of black magic. And so now she has possession of all these objects, and she's getting shadow people. She's getting things that are being displaced around her house, knocking, banging, all sorts of just crazy activity. So she's shipping the entire collection to me to dispose of, and we'll sort through it and take care of it.
So let me ask you, I don't want their address, but what is it, in our country, or is it?
Yeah, these are coming from the state of Georgia, and I'm not sure where all this person had collected from. I get stuff from all over the world. This person actually was on one of my, the person sending it to me was on one of my paranormal teams probably 15 years ago. And so she asked me to take possession of it and eliminate it.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, keep me up to date on that, man, because I like to see how that. But
Yeah, one of the things I have the advantage of, I'm currently living over near Hilton Head, South Carolina, just outside of Savannah. And so I have ocean. And one of the ways you break an attachment is through submersing in salt water. That's the use of salt and the use of water as part of the cleansing ritual. Dates back about 6,000 years to some of the earliest writings from Mesopotamia and Sumer. So I followed through with that ritual to break the attachment.
oh wow, well that's how you break. So Lisa Blythe on here had a good question, real quick, that pertains to that. How do you how do you actually destroy like something that you're about to get, if that's what you see it needs to be done?
That's what I was saying. There's actually
Okay.
the Sumerian ritual, which is, that's because I'm a geek. But you basically take it out into the salt water. Usually you say a prayer as part of it, and then you submerge it into the salt water, usually for about a minute. And historically, that breaks the attachments. And that, like I said, that's something that's been practiced for at least 6,000 years.
Oh wow.
As a matter of fact, if you've ever watched the TV show with Zathis in it, Haunted Collector, Johnny Zathis, that's the same thing he actually will do if he ever gets one of his over the top items. And we actually compared notes on that at one point.
That's pretty cool. I mean, John Zaffis, he's almost as big as your name is. Oh, but you told me about another item that was really interesting, and if I would love everybody to hear. And the reason why is because the credibility that you have with just the world, and that's that Ouija board.
I've got several. I've got
Well, the one out of Kentucky. How did you get contacted? How what'd you do and all that?
Well, it's kind of the same thing as always. People see my website, people hear me lecture, and whenever I'm out lecturing, kind of word spreads. So if you're talking about, I presume the one from West Virginia, after a while, I can't remember which ones I've told you about, because I've got one that's 100 years old that whispers.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I actually have Ouija boards all the way back to the earliest true Ouija boards by William Fuld. Um, but anyway, this particular board, the young lady had picked it up. Her next door neighbor had a yard sale, and this item was left over. And this was about 10 years ago, as I understand it. And the neighbor insisted that she take the Ouija board for free.
Oh wow.
She carried it into her house, may or may not have played with it. And then for the next 10 years, well, immediately after that, she started experiencing paranormal phenomena. Um, Sounds of movement, some shadows, some things negative started happening in her life. So she kind of set the board aside. But as the problem persisted, she decided that it was the board and she needed to get rid of it. And so as she would go to try to get rid of it, she never could. She would lose time. She couldn't throw it away. She couldn't burn it. She would lose time, and the Ouija board would end up back where it had always been before she tried to get rid of it. So a few years ago, she heard I was speaking and made an arrangement to actually come and hand over the board to me. And I get a lot of stuff like that. So, it's not that big a deal. And most of the stuff that I get they claim is haunted usually isn't. You bring it home, you kind of run it through the paces, and nothing ever happens. Well, this particular board I brought home, this was to my place in, I guess I was in Charleston then, it all blurs. Yeah, I think I was in Charleston when I first brought it. And I set it I had a glass table, and as part of the setup, I also had a security camera that was motion sensitive, that was actually pointing to the board on the table. And what began to happen over the next several days, and my house is always usually pretty heavily guarded. Lots of things to keep nasty stuff out that I don't voluntarily bring in. So over the next several days, the motion sensor on the camera, while I'm not there and there's no one at home, will periodically kick on and follow something around the room. And this goes on literally as I went back and looked at the footage, almost from the day I brought it home, for about a week before it started getting to be a nuisance. And then periodically, it would come back over to the board, and the board would lose video, or the camera would go to static. And it would do it for 10, 20, 30 seconds, depending. It would come back up, and there were items on the table that had been displaced.
Oh wow.
So this was a pattern. At the same time, I was also getting pictures knocked off the wall, doors, pounding on the doors, pounding on the walls, just the usual paranormal stuff. So anyway, in short, that's the quick version of that Ouija board story. I think that one's actually in the other room, locked up. But eventually, I put it behind a case with some what we call a furba, or it's also called a kyla or a Kyl. Hey, named after me.
There you go.
But those are weapons that are used in the Eastern tradition. So in India, in Tibet, in Nepal, some of the lowlands of China, Burma, they're weapons designed to kill gods and demons. And that's been the most powerful tool I've got in my arsenal. So I will usually take things that are really, really acting up, and I will put them behind a group of furbas, acting kind of as a gate to lock them in. But,
So when you done that, did it stop?
it stopped immediately.
No kidding.
No kidding.
That shows you how powerful those things are.
Yeah, and I've got one of them. I think I told you this story. One of them I picked up through a series of just kind of stumbles, and discovered it was auctioned in the 1970s by Sotheby's as one of the top 100 most cursed items on the planet. And that's the big gun. I didn't know it at the time I got it. The gentleman didn't send me the provenance to it until after I had already made the mistake of buying it. But literally, in order to take possession of it, I had 95 acts of random destruction.
Okay, this is the furba.
This is the cursed furba.
Okay.
And from that, it was really wild. Literally, I had a brand new car back then. I was on the interstate that surrounds Atlanta, and that's where everybody goes 80 in a 55 zone.
Yep.
I was going probably 60, 65 miles an hour or something like that. The car goes to a dead stop, like I hit something. Just physically, just stops.
Oh my goodness.
It's a miracle. I mean, cars are just shooting around me. It's a miracle I wasn't just obliterated. Well, they towed it to the dealership. Absolutely nothing wrong with the car. The computer doesn't even show faults at the point where the car stopped. I take it home. The next morning, all 4 tires explode. And that's just a couple examples. Another thing, I used to eat out every meal of my life.
Right.
So twice a day, lunch and dinner, every single meal for weeks. The server would either drop a plate on me, drop a glass on me, the plate would shatter, the glass would shatter, every single meal for weeks. It got so bad my best friends wouldn't even go out with me to dinner. So,
did you tell them the story about that, though?
Well, at the time, I didn't know.
Right.
Because this was all happening. And when the gentleman sent me the provenance for it, that was part of the legend of the weapon, that you had 95 acts of destruction. And
right.
We actually had sat down, and my count had already been close to that before the paperwork got there. So it was pretty cool. But the good thing about it is, if I'm ever in a really bad situation with something really negative, a negative entity, I can literally walk in with this particular weapon, and it goes quiet.
Like nothing ever was going on.
Yeah, it scares whatever it is away.
Oh my goodness.
It breaks whatever its link is. But that one never gets to be touched by anybody, because part of the legend is I can't give it away. Someone can ask for it, and I can give it to them, but then they have to pay the blood, what's called the blood cost, the 95 acts of destruction.
Oh my goodness, dude! My wife, for one, would kill me. For two, I'd probably pee my pants just looking at the thing.
No, I mean, well, maybe later in the show we'll do a walk around and I'll actually show you.
Oh yeah, that would be great.
I think that one. I think it's in one of the cases back there right now. So
I'm trying to talk you men, guys, to opening this house up as a museum. When he does his walk around, you're going to be amazed. But stay tuned, man. You will see this walk around, because the stuff he got, it looks like he's even got King Tut in there with him. I'm telling you right now. Real quick, let's do a commercial break here and get Chad on here real quick and see what he has to say.
Hey, this is Ghost Hunt Weekend's president, Chad Morin, and you are listening to Paranormal Highways.
Boy, doesn't he have a sexy voice?
Woohoo!
We'll give him a big hand on that one. Now, a lot of people know that I'm the demonologist and historian. The reason why I said historian plus an author, the man writes books. I've got 3 of them. One of them we call our handbook as we're doing our ghost hunts. And actually, they're on the other side of the room. And when he starts doing the walk around, I'll grab them real quick so you guys can see them. They are available at the end of the day. What'd you say, Amazon?
You can get them on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can also, your local bookstores can order them through Ingram. If you're a university, you can order them through for your classes. Actually, I've had some universities do that.
Really?
They actually took my lost things and used it as a textbook to teach courses. And I've had about 4 universities at this point do that. So that's pretty
The one I have?
Yeah.
The big one.
That one, yeah, the lost thing.
Oh, well, look, he's got one of the book right there. That's the one I love reading.
Literally, I'm sold out, so this is like my copy.
And he's got one that's smaller than that. That's what we call our handbook. It's a 101 handbook. Carry it in your pocket as you go along there. Now, what was that? That was weird. One of the biggest things that I talked to you about this weekend that was really, really crazy. We got all these big time movies coming out.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's freaking out about these movies. you know, I didn't want to say it, but we like Annabelle, The Conjuring, all that crazy stuff. You go in it, you thinking, oh my God, this is going to happen to me if I pick up a doll, you know. But there is another side of this story, and that's where you come in.
Yeah.
And the reason why you come in is because if you think it's paranormal, you want to get down to the bottom of it and see where it actually came from or if it's actually true.
Well,
And go ahead, Kyle. I'll let you explain the rest.
you know, as a historian and a paranormal investigator, and just someone who likes to learn, my first responsibility is to the truth. And I often said, I don't care what that truth is, I just want to know what it is. And so as a result, that's led to a long history of debunking or disproving a lot of the popular myths. About 4 years ago, I got pointed toward the cases that were handled by the Warrens. Part of it was professional curiosity. Part of it was because I stumbled across a case that was published in the book called The Devil in Connecticut. And the long and short version of the story is that this was the first case that in a U.S. criminal court, the person who had committed murder used the defense that the devil made me do it. He claimed he was possessed.
Oh, wow.
There had been 2 previous cases internationally in England, but those had all been thrown out and dismissed. But a gentleman named Arnie Cheyenne Johnson stood accused of a murder. And the Warren book basically had gone back or had presented their version of the events. In their version of the events, a little boy at that point named David Glatzel had allegedly been possessed or was undergoing possession. And through a series of events, they actually encountered the Warrens. And as part of that, Ed and Lorraine got involved in the case. And that actually is one of the more famous cases of theirs. Because what happens is, after allegedly several failed exorcism attempts, remember the Warrens don't really do exorcisms, contrary to the way they puff it. They do what's called a deliverance ceremony. What deliverance is are free-form prayers that are designed to encourage whatever evil spirit is to leave. And Lorraine, she's got that psychic ability or whatever to help with that. Well,
Sorry.
In this particular case, allegedly, what happens is after several botched exorcisms, the sister of David, a gentleman that she's shacking up with that's much younger than she is, they are living together, and they end up she ends up getting a job at a dog kennel, and they are kind of involved in, threesome's not really the right word, but there's kind of a love triangle because apparently the guy who owns the dog kennel has some affections toward the sister. And in the process, there eventually is an argument, and Arnie kills the owner of the dog kennel. And so the defense that is then used is that he had inherited the demon that had been possessing David Glatzel, and that caused him to do it. The court promptly said, this is crap, and sent him to prison for murder for life. He served only, like, as typical in the U.S., he only serves a few years, and he gets out of it from his life sentence. All right, so that's the gist of the Devil in Connecticut story. But what you actually begin to realize for all the Warren cases is they're not exactly as they're presented. And that's what most people don't understand. So I'll come back to this one for a second in a minute, but let me wind the history back. The Warrens started out with an interest in the paranormal. They also became radio hosts. And that was really what got them their start, is they were routinely pumping out a radio show, and I believe it was originally weekly. And so they were pumping out this show, and over time, the Warrens' experience got to be greater and greater and greater to try to get audience share, presumably. And if you hunt around on the internet, you can actually still find some of the Warrens' early shows. But it eventually came to the point where, and this is solely my opinion for this next part, they needed to pump up the ratings significantly.
Right.
They got involved with a gentleman named Gerald Brittle, who was an author, and they proceeded to then create, not report, create the cases like the Amityville Horror. And these were all the stuff that led into the Conjuring and the Annabelle story.
Oh, wow.
Brittle actually helped write them. And this came to light because what happened is the movie studio didn't pay him his royalties. He was supposed to get residual royalties on the book and any derivative rights, which meant he should have gotten millions
Right.
off of the movies. So what eventually happens, the studio says, no, this is historical fact. We're just presenting a history story. And Brittle then produces, as he sues them for, it starts out at $800 million and eventually rises to $900 million. Because as the rates, or as the revenue stream increases, the percentage he's owed increased.
Right.
So in order to win the case, the movie studio had to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt to a reasonable jury that the paranormal existed. And that's why actually for years, if you were a paranormal investigator and you could have proven the paranormal existed, they would have written you a check for the millions.
Oh, wow.
But what ends up happening as it starts to get closer to court, Gerald produced original tape recordings of him and the Warrens sitting around a table making all of it up.
Oh, my goodness.
He also produced his actual notebooks. Again, with him and the Warrens making it up. So eventually this case, just recently, a few months back, gets settled and disappears. Let me now go back to the Devil in Connecticut story. So while this case was still being batted about 4 years ago, the now adult David Glatzel finds out that they're going to republish The Devil in Connecticut. Now, when it was first published, that book, he was a minor, and he didn't have the right to refuse legally. His parents signed away their rights after being promised fame and fortune by the Warrens for $5,000.
Wait, 5,000?
$5,000.
Oh, wow.
So when the book went to be republished, David sued because he was now an adult and ended up stopping that publication of the book. But as part of that, he actually hired another writer he hired a writer to go through and create his version of the story. And if you're really a good scholar, you can dig up parts of it floating around the internet because they had a website, and even though later on they settled the case, they left the website up. They just couldn't add anything to it. So through that, I actually have been able to contact both that writer as well as David, and he literally says the whole thing was made up. He says the Warrens coached him on how to act possessed. They coached him on how to behave, and the whole thing was a fraud.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing to actually talk to someone firsthand who was involved in some of this. And, he is the very first to say, though, as a child, he was slow and had some mental issues. And that was what was puffed up to make it a case of possession. And I should say, just for your viewers, I've been doing the whole demonology thing for a long time, and I've studied a lot of the really popular exorcism cases and a lot of the historical cases. And almost every single one of them is not demonic. All the famous cases, they're more mental issues that were happening at the time during a period where we didn't understand how the mind works. Things like grand mal seizures, which is epilepsy. We didn't understand, so people immediately thought it was possession. Or, certain deviant behaviors like bipolar. People, again, didn't understand it, so it's obviously the influence of the devil. So it's kind of a pattern. As a matter of fact, of all the possession cases, I've only found one of the famous ones that have legitimacy. And that's a little girl in South Africa. Her name is Celie, Cele, I believe is how it's spelled. In the case there, she was 16 years old, and she allegedly made a pact with the devil or a demon of some kind. She was in South Africa. She was at a Catholic orphanage, and the reason this case has credibility is several reasons. One, as she started exhibiting these signs of possession,
Right.
the priest didn't know what to do. So he actually took a boat. Remember, this is like early 1900s. He took a boat all the way to the Vatican to consult with the Office of Exorcism there, the Holy See, and he came back. When he came back, this little girl who only spoke her native Africana language, she didn't speak Dutch, she didn't speak German, she didn't speak Italian, she told the priest in Italian who he had met with, where he had gone, and what he had done.
Oh my goodness.
And there are multiple witnesses to that. But the thing that knocks this case out of the ballpark, as I said, she was in a Catholic orphanage, and so they decided to, one of the requirements that gets ignored a lot, in the movies anyway, is that you only do an exorcism on holy ground. So you only do it in a church or something that's sanctified.
Right.
So took her to the front of the church in the school, the orphanage, and that's where they did the exorcism. There are 200 other orphans that are part of this congregation that are there witnessing this exorcism. And they're praying and singing and things like that. In the middle of the exorcism, and remember, when we talk about an exorcism, it's really lots and lots of exorcisms. A real exorcism ritual lasts about 30 minutes, and then you repeat it over and over and over again. And it can be, 6 hours, it could be a week, it could be, in some cases, 2 or 3 years worth of this ritual. But in the middle of one of the recitations of the exorcism, 200 witnesses watch this little girl levitate up in front of the church.
Oh my goodness.
And there are 200, it's like 215, 216 signatories signed the actual testament of what happened.
Holy cow.
It's the only case that we know of that has that many witnesses with that kind of documentation.
Well, I remember you telling me a while back, 99.9% of the time when you go in to check these, it's never, well, I won't say never, it's not demons.
Yeah, most of the time, if it's not something psychological or mental there, if it is something legitimately paranormal, it's just a pissed off spirit. It's an apparition that's malevolent. A demon isn't what we have come to think of it as. If you think about it, we take ourselves as being pretty smart, right? But a being or an entity that maybe lives 300 or 400 years or, some long duration, it has the ability to be a lot smarter than we are.
Right.
And there's no reason, like in a creepy movie, that it's hanging out in some deserted haunted house on the off chance that some kid will wander in to make a good scary movie. It's just like any intelligent creature that feeds. It's going to go where the food is. And it is not in its interest to be known, right? If you have a mosquito that's coming to suck your blood, as soon as you see it, you're going to start swatting at it.
Right.
And that's going to drive it away. Unless you're in South Carolina, in which case it goes and gets its friends. And
it just brings them all to you.
so, a demon's not going to stick around. If you challenge it, it doesn't want to know. It doesn't want people to know. It's not going to do the creepy stuff. It's not going to bleed the walls. It's not going to do things that are overtly attention grabbing. And even if you do catch it, or even if it does screw up and does something overt, it's going to pretend to be an apparition. I had a case where one pretended to be a little girl, and as it turned out, a little girl had been killed in front of the house a few years earlier.
Oh,
but,
wow.
It's not like it is in the movies. These are sharp entities, but of all, like I mentioned before, most cases you can disprove quickly. There's even some tests that we do when we go in to interview a potential client that 99.999% of the time trips them up, and we end up disproving it without a lot of effort.
Right. Um, Speaking of that, do you? I mean, I just want to touch base real quick. There's a lot of people that I know sent me things about because they knew you was a demonologist and they really wanted to hear it. Are you going to be able to figure out? I know you're going to if it's going to turn out as an apparition, but really, like you said, it does not let itself be known. So, does your body or anything give you any sort of like warning that hey, this is stronger than just that, malevolent spirit?
Everybody gets it. Just most of us don't know how to read it or how to react to it. It's innate. It's just like you're walking down the street and there are homeless people all around begging for money. You tune them out at some point. It's kind of the same thing. Our minds are designed that if it's something that we can't rationalize, we filter it out. And, that's true with a lot of paranormal type events. I usually use the term paranormal events rather than paranormal entities because I don't know that a lot of the events we're encountering are necessarily a deceased individual and that's a whole other physics discussion there, parallel worlds, M theory, and stuff like that. But I think when you encounter something that's demonic, your body does react. Your hairs do stand on end. It's just like for those who are sensitive to actual hauntings, it's kind of the same thing, but it's worse. And, in some cases, you kind of feel like kind of a clenching of the stomach. I mean, it's hard to describe. It's just
Like something's grabbing your gut.
well, it's like your gut's reacting to recoil from it.
Oh,
It's
wow.
every sense in your body. Humans are built with fight or flight responses. And it's just like in the back of your mind, it's able to process enough to say, hey, there's something you don't need to be around.
Okay.
And, we've trained ourselves to ignore our own intuition a lot of times, but it's kind of the same thing. And, that's not to say it's foolproof. I mean, I use the example where it's pretending to be a little girl. Part of what made that case particularly difficult is none of the equipment worked.
Really?
It wasn't trying to do a possession. It was just there. It was using it as a layer to hunt from. And it just happened that those clients had kind of stumbled in the way. And, it took literally, that was the only way we even figured that it was a demon. It was where the electric trunk came into the building, so none of the equipment really worked. I mean, even video cameras, there was so much electric pouring into there that the digital cameras were getting.
Was that because how powerful that? I guess you would say it was demon at that time.
No, it's bad wiring in northern Atlanta.
Okay.
It had been an old age home, and it had been it started out as low income housing, and then it was turned into an old age home, and eventually became kind of low rent apartments. And this particular townhouse thing, it was like they were like townhouses. This particular one is where the electric trunk for the entire complex came in. And it was built in the 70s, not up to code at all, and there was so much EMF. If you'd gone in, for instance, with a millimeter, 300 yards away, the millimeter maxed out.
Oh my goodness.
There was, I wouldn't have lived there, let me put it that way. It was horrific amounts of electric, just kind of cascading through there. So none of the equipment worked. And so it was using it as a camouflage.
Oh, wow.
So
it was hiding underneath all that EMF.
Yeah. But what happened is, as it started trying to interact with these girls to get them out of the way, it started showing strength that an apparition could not possibly muster. Because it was trying to pretend to be a little girl.
Right.
But it's a whole series. The very first thing it did to these girls, they had stolen some stones from the Bonaventure Cemetery in Savannah and brought it back to this townhouse. That night, the girl had gone to sleep in her bedroom. She woke up and the bedroom had been completely rearranged.
Oh, wow.
And the next thing that had happened is that the girls had been arguing. One of them left. Again, the same girl who had her bedroom rearranged had gone to a bathroom downstairs, and the door was held for half an hour. She couldn't get out. And then literally at the end of half hour, the door opens up. We went and we looked at that bedroom door. There's no way it could stick. It just wasn't, the engineering on it was not possible. We eventually, as we started interacting with this thing, it started getting stronger and stronger, or demonstrating it. And it would do things like, you would say, "Are you here? Let us know." And then they had these big ficus trees, and it would shake the ficus trees.
Holy cow.
They had a hemp and seashell, I guess it's a wind chime, but it was like in the breakfast nook, the way this place was laid out. And it would take that and it would spin it up and just let it spin. If the girls started fighting, it would throw plates to get their attention, to shut them up. Guys, as they would walk to the house, would get the door slammed in their face. I had that many times. But the amount of electric was over the top. The amount of telekinetic was over the top, unexplainable.
Holy cow.
It eventually, through a lamp that the other girl, as the case developed, the trunk of the electric was not in the original girl's room, it was in the other girl. The other girl suffered from night terrors, and she had since they moved into the house.
Part of the EMF?
Either the EMF or its influence, the demonic's influence. And again, that's good cover, you know.
Yeah.
But she had this lamp on her end table, and the lamp moved to the left about 1.5 feet, down the hallway about 2 feet, and then over a balcony and crashed to the floor below. But there was nobody on that floor at all.
You heard this or seen it, or?
I saw the lamp smash on the floor. But there was nobody upstairs.
Did it land near you guys?
It landed at the very base of the stairs.
Holy cow.
And, literally, like I said, it had to move about 1 foot over. It had to move a couple feet down, up and over the balcony.
That's nuts. I'm telling you.
Yeah, and, it was like a heavy glass porcelain-y thing. So, I mean, it easily weighed about 10 to 15 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the case gets a lot worse from there. But that's the quick version.
All right. Real quick, we're going to take another break, and when we get back, we're going to take some questions on our first little session here about what Kyl's talking about. So you guys get your questions ready. I'll pop them up on screen for him, and let's hear Chad.
Hey, this is Ghost Hunt Weekend's President Chad Morin, and you are listening to Paranormal Highways.
Well, he's rocking right along with this thing, isn't he?
I will give a shout out to Chad and Ghost Hunt Weekends. They're all great groups. I get asked all the time to attend events, different paranormal tourist agencies offering things like that. But Ghost Hunt Weekends is the place, my choice. They're my friends. They're really professional, and I'd go through hell and high water for them. So,
thank you, Kyle. I'm pretty sure Chad loves that. I'm gonna tell you what. Anytime Kyle's around there, I'm like,
those are
all right, guys, it's time for you guys to pop up some questions. Let's pop up some questions about what we just talked about. Does anybody have anything you'd like to talk to Kyle? No, I've seen a couple of them, but I was trying to let you get through.
If not, I'll share a quick walkthrough for you if you'd like.
Yeah, we could do that. If not, Kyle can do the walkthrough of his museum. I keep calling it a museum. Amy mutters, she says, "I love you, Kyle."
Aw.
I did see one from Laura Torres. She did ask, she would like to know your thoughts on the parallel universe kind of thing there.
Okay, get ready to get your 5th grade physics lesson. Once upon a time, science struggled to understand why mathematics for Very small objects and very large objects didn't agree. So they couldn't understand why things like electrons and protons and neutrons, the physics there, didn't seem to rectify with planetary physics. The math just wouldn't work. And they eventually, over time, they started out calling it the unified field theory, and they never could make it work. In 1998, a group of physicists came up with something called the M theory. And the way you made the math work is it required there be 11 dimensions. Now, when we talk about a dimension, a dot is one dimension. Something that's two-dimensional would be a drawing, for instance. Three-dimensional is us, width, height, and length. Fourth dimension is then taking that width, height, and length and moving it through time. And the permutations continue. So, long story short, once they added it to 11 dimensions, the math suddenly works. Well, what did that mean? Part of it said that requires there to be parallel universes. And so if you think about it, our entire everything is like a dot on a piece of paper. And that dot on a piece of paper is surrounded by an infinite number of other dots. And they're all moving. And when we come close to each other, one of the theories is that that's really what a paranormal event is. They're not ghosts. And as a matter of fact, we're not just that one sheet of paper, we're a ream of paper, and we're all moving. So one belief is that as our universes come really close, our realities is maybe a better term, come really close to touching, we're their ghost, and they're our ghost. And there's some really cool science that explains, like, with apparitions, one of the things you hear about are cold spots. Well, that doesn't make sense. Does a ghost suddenly get supernatural powers to absorb heat? But what does make sense is there's something called law of conservation of energy. And under that, it says that all the energy and matter in our existence is constant. You can't increase it or decrease it. You just change forms. But what if something that were in a parallel universe was just close enough to, like a balloon, push on our balloon a little bit? Well, that means energy is being put into our universe. It can't hold it because we have a constant. So our energy is sucked out of our universe, cold spot, to offset the difference. So that's how, one of the ways that as we're looking at this idea of parallel universes, it even gets a little cooler because our universe doesn't, even though we may be very similar to another universe, it doesn't have to be in the same time we are. So that would explain why you see a Civil War soldier. It's not that it's left over from the Civil War in our reality. It's an entity that's still in the Civil War in its reality.
Oh, wow.
So that's the quick version of it. It's called M theory. M as in Mary. You can Google it, and
I'll post it up there. M theory. Google it, guys. Google it. Shisha likes Googles. All right. This one came from Amy. I'm interested to see. This
well,
could be interesting.
yeah. Most of them that you will encounter, most of them that you will find on eBay or just about anywhere else are fake. Just like any memory box. All right, remember, at least part of this goes back to early Jewish tradition. In the Jewish tradition, there is no heaven or hell. You are preserved by basically the memory of you. That's one of the reasons deceased will have their names read, for instance, and things like that. Well, in this case, it's a memory box. It's not like an ossuary. It doesn't necessarily contain bones or the remains of the person. It contains personal memories or personal effects or personal statement about the person to act as a memory. Well, over time, it's got kind of, because you usually seal them to preserve the contents inside, so they become a mystery. And a lot of people, I would say incorrectly, attribute negative paranormal entities to it. But that's not usually the case. It's a religious object. It would be no different than carrying around somebody's coffin or something like that. So I generally say that they should be treated with respect, whether someone thinks there's paranormal or not. It's just like any object that could have paranormal attached to it. Nothing extraordinary there.
Not like we all like to expand the truth.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm possessed today. Wednesday, I'll be possessed again.
Oh, you keep that up, you'll have a TV show called Ghost Student.
It's a question from Kat Maria, one of my faves on here. She's got this for you, Kyle.
Well, I usually hire a maid.
It's our maid.
Really nice lady. Her name's Paulette. Anyway, I practice a lot of traditions. I have studied both Eastern and Western concept. Most of the time, I mentioned earlier, the furba. I can literally walk into a house with a furba and that washes stuff out. I've had the experience of, with the Maya at the sun death ritual, actually watching them do some hardcore smoke and smudgings as part of that. But honestly, there is no, I guess, handbook for what someone could do at home. But that my approach has always been, if it's something really nasty, a furba. But before that, part of what you have to do is you have to respect your clients' religious perspectives. And if they're Buddhist, you apply the proper Buddhist treatment. If they're Christians, you maybe get your local priest involved to do a house blessing. You take those normal steps. And then, most people don't realize that it's part of like a standard house cleansing ritual. First of all, most of what we think of as house cleansing rituals is totally made up crap. It didn't really exist more than about 50, 60 years ago. So most of what we take for granted as rituals, it's just kind of made up. A lot of even like the demonic stuff, the witch, all right, this is going to get me in trouble if you have any witches on board. But most of the stuff that modern witches claim are spells are really Christian prayers in something called a grimoire. They were Christian spells. But they don't realize that. And because most of the modern, the Wicca, the different witch sects and things like that, most of their books were written in the late 19th century, so late 1800s. And there's very little actual material that supports them. And that's one of the things I do is I go back and I tear these things apart. And in particular, in the case of witchcraft, I actually have the dictionary on how to read the actual magic symbols in these early grimoires. I have the sigil dictionaries, which is about $15,000 to get a hold of. But, they just don't, they only understand a small portion and are relying on books that didn't do their research in the first place. I know I kind of deviated from the question a little
bit. But the sage and stuff like that, as house cleanings, it's still a purity, right?
Smudging, smoke ceremonies do have positive effects. And usually, from a science perspective, it actually eliminates some bacteria. But actually, even with the modern cleansing and saging, part of what you're supposed to do with that ritual is you're supposed to do a thorough house cleaning physically, like vacuuming and mopping and wiping it. So you're actually supposed to do an actual physical part of that cleaning in addition to the ceremony, which that gets ignored in most.
That's the wiping down the walls with salt water and all that.
Yeah.
Part, yeah. All right, let's go on. Karen has this for you. Nice, good one.
Is there anything
you need me to pop that up again?
Yeah, if you would, just half a second, but I think I got the gist, I believe. Okay, honestly, I quit about every other week, sometimes more frequently. The hardest thing I ever do is, I mentioned earlier, I get about 200 inquiries a month. Every single one of them has to have attention. Because even though most of them aren't really a paranormal case, most of them aren't what we would consider a true demonic case, they're people that are in bad situations. They're desperate. They're afraid. They're scared. They've watched one too many episodes of that guy who gets possessed every week. They've been brainwashed into thinking that there are these things that are constantly out to get them. So the hardest thing I do is I have to listen to these people and I have to give them my full attention because they need it. And, I will guide them sometimes to say, hey, this doesn't sound paranormal. You may want to consult a psychiatrist or a doctor or a priest or you have to you point them to a way that they can help themselves. But yeah, that's the hardest part. But there is nasty stuff out there, really nasty stuff.
Yeah.
One of the cases, well, I mentioned this case earlier, the one with that threw the lamp over. That case went really, really badly. And in that case, someone died. So that was not my best moment. But in that particular case, I'd made the mistake of telling the clients at that location that I believed that they were dealing with a demonic entity. Later that day, I had headed home, and I was just about to get home, and it came after me. And when you see the movies and stuff like that, there's the physical side. Yeah, it's strong, it's fast. There's a physical side, but that doesn't begin to compare to what real possession is. The word for possession actually translates properly into or to suggest. And that's literally what these entities do. They're not sliding into your body and wearing you like a skin suit, like on Supernatural. They are actually planting thoughts in your mind as though they're your thoughts. And that's kind of chilling. And I've had this happen many, many times to different degrees. But in this particular case, as part of the scuffle, it told me I was cold. Well, that on itself doesn't sound bad. But it was late August in Atlanta. It was about 104 degrees every day that particular summer. And it told me I was cold. So for the next several weeks, I'm wearing a heavy winter jacket. I have blankets wrapped around me. They can find no medical excuse. They could literally, I was burning my body apart.
Oh, well.
But I was freezing. And it takes a while just for your own mind to come to terms with that this isn't really what's happening. And that almost took me out. As a result of me being out of commission for that, it ended up a young 21-year-old kid was killed as part of the whole thing.
Wow.
It's an embarrassing situation, but, I thought really hard that I wasn't the guy to do this. And the thing is, every time I quit, every time I say, I can't handle this, I can't handle listening to all these people crying for help, someone calls me and they need help. And I can't turn them down. I can't turn a blind eye to it. And people always ask, well, why don't you take an apprentice or something like that? I wouldn't wish this on anybody. I really wouldn't. If I could do it over again, I wouldn't have gotten involved in that. I've been studying ancient religion since 12. And, I never intended to get involved in the paranormal. That was something that it just made itself happen. And, I'm a traveler. I'm an adventurer. I'm a historian. And that was the last thing I ever pondered doing. But
Laura was asking if you were taking applications for proteges. So.
No, because I'm always scared that they'll get killed in the process. If you want the truth, they're driven crazy. I mean,
Crazy.
This life is not. My best friend, she's been put through hell and through some of the things that have happened. So you just you can't take the risk. So,
Well, just like you said in the audio part when we first done our podcast, you guys might well go out and leave. I mean, he builds up to where he's at now on that podcast. And at the end, I pretty much ask him if it takes a toll on him himself. And as you can tell, the man looks like he's wore out sometimes.
always.
But on that sense, guys, check it out. I'm going to let Kyl walk around real quick. I'm going to grab me a good drink of water while he shows you the museum. And then we'll get back to our second part real quick about Annalisa Michael.
Okay. All right. So y'all will bear with me. I'm going to try this. I don't know how to make this point forward with this software, but we'll give you a quick kind of look. All right. So way up here, I've got some Indian artifacts. Those are, I believe, Apache. Let's see, priest robes and processional. So now we get to some of like the real artifacts. Up there is a Civil War Confederate boarding spike, and so this is kind of some of the religious stuff. There's a cross in there. I don't know if you can see it on there. Blessed by Pope John Paul II. There. Oh, this is kind of cool. I don't know if you can see her. Not so much. Let me see if I can light this up. Bear with me. I should have been more prepared. I don't know if you can see the little statue, and probably not. Yeah, there. You can't really see her. That is actually a contemporary statue of Joan of Arc. It's one of the few in the world, and if you see a picture of Joan of Arc in a textbook, it came from my statue. I have some Indian artifacts. This is the Maya collection. Seeing some of that. There's also some Iroquois and Lambiquet stuff in there. Whoa, that was not good. So you'll have to bear with me. I'm not used to doing this kind of walkthrough, so particularly when I
I
can't.
told you he had a mummy.
Yeah. This is kind of cool. That is John the Baptist. Let's see if we can get it from a better angle. There's a medieval head of John the Baptist and a Celtic sacrifice head and a Mayan pot. Yeah, this is probably not going to work too easily. Y'all probably are just like, I can't see anything. This is some of the Chinese stuff. That's a illustrated page out of Catherine de' Medici. The Medicis are famous banking families in Italy. That's one of her prayer book pages. I was really lucky to get that. That's the Emperor of China's penis, sort of. I don't know if you can see that. This is part of the Egyptian collection. So we have an amphora from Egypt that was recovered in 1880. It's actually from Canaan. This is kind of cool if we can see it. Maybe I can. Oh, oops. That wasn't good.
Don't be tearing nothing up, Kyle.
Yeah, I shifted my case. So this is an actual slave bracelet that, all right, slavery happened. It didn't happen kind of the way they try to paint it today. So people who were taken as slaves, African tribes in Africa would take the opposing tribes, raid them, and take them as slaves and then sell it to the Dutch. Well, this is what they would actually forge onto the leg of a slave. So this eventually made it over to South Carolina, but obviously the slave had to die to lose it. So that
eventually it landed in Kyle's hands.
Yes. I mentioned the furbas. We can actually take a look at those real quick.
Did you have a lock on that?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so these are furbas. So what a furba is, this is a typical one. And I'm trying to figure out how to balance this thing and show you. So this is a furba. And they're made of 7 sacred metals. And the idea is that there are also some that are made of wood, but they are designed to nail, sometimes directly, the demon to the ground, to the earth. But they also suck the energy out of them. So what it turns out from a metallurgical perspective, most of these are actually lightning rods. And so you can actually take them into a system that's highly static, and it'll suck the energy out of it into the furba. So these have been used around the world, Tibet, China, Nepal, India, to kill demons. Most of my collection are between 200 and 500 years old. And they come in some different styles. This is a Hindi or Indian. Hindi. This is Ganesh on the top. And so the one right here, this is the one that's actually the one I mentioned earlier, and she's about 14 inches.
Is that your oldest one?
No, this is the one that's the cursed one. The oldest one,
That's the cursed one. Okay.
yeah, the oldest one is actually on loan to Felix right now. Um, but I think that it's either there in one of the other cases. But this one has actually, if you get it into a really high energy location, the circles here will spark. So
Oh
static
wow.
electricity discharges through the circles there. So anyway,
Kyle, I got a question for somebody on there for you if you want to take a quick look.
sure.
Shasta?
Oh, at this point, they've pretty much done their damage to me. Whoops. Oh, yeah, that wasn't good. Stand by.
Well,
Experiencing technical difficulties. Just as I said, oh, they're mostly stable. That one just decided to shift radically. I'll blame that on Kyle not putting it back properly. Um, but most of the time they've done their course of what they're going to do. So once I take them in and out of the case, usually nothing. Now I will say though, I recently moved to here in where I live right now, down near Hilton Head, and so as part of that, we started. I took all the protections. I brought the artifacts here before I brought the protections, and so while that was happening, activity just broke out all over the place. It was literally crazy here. And let's see. I think you can see some of the artwork here. By the way, Mayan death whistles. You may have heard of those.
You talking about what Chad has?
Yeah, these are the real ones. These, as you blow them, if you do it correctly, after a few seconds, they'll start sounding like a human scream. They're awesome. I was lucky that a professor in Canada got them for me. And that's actually a Mayan flute, right there. That's a big old Mayan flute. And so I have a ton of this stuff. I love history, and I love to explore. And I've been really lucky over the years that different folks have rewarded me with it. Oh, but one of the cool things, this is total geek. I love Camelot, King Arthur, and that's from an actual promotion piece from the movie Camelot. Anyway, totally.
Oh, that's from the movie?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Totally random. But yeah. So
fascinating, man. Absolutely fascinating.
That's a quick walkthrough. I mean, it's just stuff, but I enjoy it.
All right, let me get on here. I'll give Chad his last moment here. So, everybody, and then we'll get right into that question. And, guys, save your questions till afterwards. That way that you can all, do questions at the end when he gets done talking about Annalisa Michael. Hit it, Chad.
Hey, this is Ghost Hunt Weekend's President Chad Morin, and you are listening to Paranormal Highways.
Yeah, I like that. I don't sit around and listen to it, but I like that. All right, guys. Now, you all seen the movie. It's Emily Rose, right?
Yep.
Emily Rose. And you've heard of her, and you've seen a lot of things on the internet and everything else like that. Now, we've got Kyle. You know a little bit about him. Let's hear the other side of Annalisa Michael. Kyle, it's all you, brother.
All right. So, as was mentioned, the Americans saw a movie called The Exorcism of Emily Rose. And that was supposed to be based on the true story of Annalise Michael. When I first got involved with this case, I was writing my my big book, The Lost Things, and wanted to take the most popular 5 exorcism cases and research them. And I didn't want to do it from a paranormal perspective. I said, let me find out what the real history is. And so I took the case like the boy behind the Exorcist movie as an example, and dug into its history. And actually, I think I'm one of the first people who ever in a book outed him as to his real identity and things like that. That's a cool case, by the way, but anyway, that's an aside. But Annalise Michael, I guess the first exposure to it is if you Google her on the internet, you see some horrific pictures. You see a woman with her teeth smashed out, who's skin and bones. You see a picture of her laying on her deathbed. It's a tragedy. So as a result, I decided I really needed to understand this woman. I needed to understand what had happened. So as part of it, we're really lucky in the case of Annalise Michael in that there's a lot of history, true historical evidence. So for those of you who don't know, the quick version of the Annalise Michael story. She's a little German girl, and this takes place beginning in late 1960s, early 1970s. And she is raised in a religious family, and as part of that, she does things like she goes to confession every day. She makes religious pilgrimages to local shrines in the area. Well, beginning in about 1970, she starts experiencing things happen. And she's always been a sickly girl. She has pleurisy at one point. She has some seizures. And as her condition gets worse, her family attributes it to, in one case, her mother attributes it to the mother's own sins, that Annalise is being punished as a result. And there begins to be kind of a religious context placed on the case. Well, through her local priest, the one that she confesses to frequently, eventually it gets brought up to a Jesuit priest through a neighbor. And even though this local priest that she confessed to regularly had conducted the test for possession, he had found no evidence of it. But this Jesuit priest decides that he wants to make a name for himself. And by this point, it's about 1973, and the book, The Exorcist, has become popular.
Oh.
It's just about to become a movie. And this priest decides he wants to become famous and wants to be on the lecture circuit. So as part of that whole process, I've got a picture of Annalise. It's not the horrible one. I don't know if you can see it. That's the pretty little girl.
Up higher. There you go.
There you go. So she's a beautiful girl. And if I'd been thinking, I would pull down the one that's in color. I've got the... So there's another good shot of her. So she's this beautiful, vibrant young lady. So a guy named... Father Alt gets involved, and he should not be allowed to do an exorcism because one of the requirements is that the older priest has to be involved. And Father Alt, relatively speaking, is a young man. He's in his 30s. There's another priest involved, Arnold Rentz, and Rentz should be the elder priest. He should be the exorcist, if there was one. But basically, over the course of the next several years, they convince her that she's possessed. They go through, and I mentioned before, an exorcism lasts about 30 minutes on average, the standard full exorcism, and you repeat it over and over again. Well, one of the things that they would do as part of it is in between each 30-minute session, they would make her what they call prostrate themselves to a cross. That's where they get down on their knees, and then they lay with their arms spread like Jesus hanging on the cross. And they do this over and over again as they're saying prayers. So imagine she does an exorcism for 30 minutes. She does this for about 10 to 20 minutes. Then they go right into another exorcism. And they do this every single hour of the day. So they may do this whole set. They may do 15 exorcisms in one day. And this isn't just one day that they do it. They do this for months. And part of the insanity of this girl's life is she's told that to be truly pious, she has to fast. So she stops eating. That's why she looks so horrible in most of her pictures, is because she was starving herself to death. Because she was prostrating herself over and over again, she destroys her kneecaps. That's why she couldn't walk. And as a result of not being able to walk, she falls and smashes her teeth out. So, and by the way, we know all of this as absolute fact from the court case. Eventually, what happens is Annalise is killed doing exorcisms. And the priest and her family are all charged with manslaughter under German law. And so we have the depositions, we have the entire court case, the testimony from the doctors, the testimony from all the different priests. It turns out that Father Alt actually was doing tape recordings of the exorcisms to use for his lecture tour and his eventual book deal, he thought. Amazingly, however, the first set of tests when they were testing her for possession that disproved it, those tapes were not available. They were destroyed. That's why if you Google really hard on the internet, you can actually find the true exorcism case. You can find the exorcism happening for her. It's in German though, so maybe a little hard. But so is the court proceedings. They're all in German. I was able actually to get a hold of her diary, a copy of it in German. And so to me, this little girl, if I had a daughter, I really feel for this girl. She could be my daughter. I mean, I got to know her so well in going through everything. And to me, it's one of the biggest tragedies in paranormal history and in demonology in general. These priests killed this girl. He wanted fame, and he ended up sacrificing her life as part of it. I'll show you, for those of you who haven't seen it, I think I've got one of the bad pictures.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure everybody in the paranormal world that
Yeah,
see
I'm sure you've all seen things like that.
yeah,
Pictures of her on her deathbed. Well, to add insult to injury, by the way, after she was buried, I think it was about a year and a half later, no, 2 years, her parents had her dug up again because there was a legend that if you were possessed, your body didn't decompose. So they had her exhumed, and of course she had decomposed. But
why even do that to that poor child?
because they were complete nutters. I mean, they believed the religious side of things. Ironically, the Catholic Church, about 10, 15 years ago, reversed their position and declared the fact that she was not possessed. And as a matter of fact, when the medical records are examined, ultimately she suffered from grand mal seizures, which is a form of epilepsy. And that causes things like the phantom smells that she had encountered. It causes hallucinations, both auditory and visual. So this poor girl was just really a sick mental patient. And they're actually, we've talked about the exorcism of Emily Rose, but there's actually a different version of the movie called Requiem. It's in German, it's a foreign film. Totally brilliant, and it's the other side of the coin. It's, okay, this is really a mental illness case.
Oh,
and it's interesting to watch the two and compare because Requiem's pretty darn close to the truth.
It just goes to show that I'm pretty sure they do it more these days, especially if you're involved, that they add more doctors to this, situation because, that's sad.
Unfortunately, they don't.
They don't?
It's a requirement, but it depends on who the Pope is. The current Pope, Catholic Pope, is a little bit more along the supernatural, superstitious vein. And as a result, the Office of Exorcism has switched to kind of that. There are cases all the time I get from people who allegedly were possessed and had an exorcism. Well, most of the time, they're like rubber stamping the exorcisms. Most of the time, they're not full exorcisms. They're what we call the minor exorcism, which is like, again, the Warren's deliverance ceremony. They're prayers.
Right.
In the Catholic case, they're standardized. But you would be surprised at how many these days exorcisms occur. of which probably none of them have any legitimacy, or very few of them do. And I've actually run into quite a few people who have actually gone through the minor exorcism, and it's clear that there's nothing demonic involved in the situation.
So there's not really any fine line between mental illness and possession.
Well, the question from a historical perspective is most of the time possession, which is because we didn't have the science of how the mind works,
Right.
to know the difference. And there is a delineation, but you have to get to that delineation. You have to have the proper experts involved, and you have to go through those steps, which these days that gets circumvented a lot more than it should. And then add to that the fake churches. There are individuals out there who've made themselves bishops of their own church.
Yeah.
Just so they can appear on another show where they get possessed every week. But it's one of those things that there's so much disinformation out there. My leading, I think I've probably gone on record with you or some other folks in the past. My number one set of clients are clergy.
Oh, really?
I get calls from preachers, priests, shaman, Jamin, the whole gambit, because they need guidance. And, sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. And I'm a resource. And so if I had to pick a class of clients, one of the things I actually was lucky enough to get. So the original Catholic, and I'm going to step off the screen here for a second.
All right.
The original famous ritual is the Roman Ritual 1614 edition. And that was superseded a few years ago by a new exorcism spell in Latin. And I know it's backwards, which always drives me crazy. I can't understand why they can't have technology that looks.
It's written backwards?
Well, no, it just looks that way on the screen, or at least
Oh.
Well, I was lucky enough, however, I've actually received an official copy of the new English edition.
Oh, wow.
The only way you can get this is to actually go and attend the exorcism courses at the Vatican. But as a thank you for an upcoming project, I received that.
So you attended?
No. I got that as a thank you for, which makes me unusual in that I was given one without having attended the exorcism.
Oh.
Part of the reason I got that was my next book, if it ever makes it out, I disprove Lucifer. And if you happen to be at Scarefest in September, I'm actually that's one of the lectures I'm doing, is a preview of the next book. But I disprove Lucifer. He's a typo.
And if you all want to hear that, that may be a next conversation when I can catch Kyle. But if you can, get to the Scarefest, because he will be at Scarefest. Catch him at the booth. He does do a lecture on that, and that's going to be interesting. I wonder how many people you're going to scare off.
Yeah, I got two. I'm doing 2 lectures, I think, so far this year. I'm going to do gods, demigods, and demons, which is how one religion's demon is another religion's god.
Right.
And we're also going to do the Lucifer typo, which is where I go and I disprove everything you've ever thought was true.
See, he's amazing. I'm telling you guys. All right, let's go ahead and take some questions if you all have anything on the Annalisa Michael or, his books that he just showed you.
Or whatever.
Or whatever. It don't matter. Throw them up there. I'll let him see them. I like the 3-second delay.
I worked in radio for years. I've dumped many a conversation.
Well, Dungeons and Dragons? What?
Gods, demigods, and heroes?
Oh, there you go. What's your thought on aliens?
Well, whether we grant them amnesty or not. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Different question.
You just wanted to get your thought on aliens.
First of all, I believe that there is life throughout the galaxy, but the question with aliens is more one of, is it practical at this point in time for them to travel to a little out of the way planet in the middle of nowhere? Um, I think one of the fascinating theories that I have read is that it's more a time travel issue, a time and space travel, than it is an actual visitor from another planet, possibly. I'm very open to it. I still think a lot of what we have in the past attributed to UFOs and and aliens is military experimentation. For instance, for a long time, what became the stealth bomber and the stealth fighter were being considered UFOs, and then, of course, it was revealed that they're military. So I think that there is credibility to it, but the jury's still out.
All right, Laura Torres, when's your Lucifer typo book released?
Lord, I don't know. It's hard. The Lucifer section's done. But what happened is I started writing a totally different book. I was writing a book going through medieval and Renaissance exorcism cases, possession cases. And along the way, I kept having paranormal investigators from around the world routinely calling and saying, Kyl, I've got this case where this person claims to be this demon. What do you know? And so I would go and I would research the individual demon. And when I do research, I do research. So, I will go through and I will take like the earliest reports of the demon's name. I will go and I will translate the name going backwards, trace them through other religions, trace them through different names. And I basically break it apart. So in the case of Lucifer, I did the same thing. And I actually was able to come out with it. The problem I've been having is because I am such a research nerd, some of the other demons, I'm spending months and months digging into them to get the book done. So it'll come out when it comes out. I've been promising this book for like a year and a half, and it just doesn't want to get done. Every time I think I'm close to it, I kind of go down a rabbit hole and find this whole new thing that I never knew about. It's like that, this particular god in this religion was also worshipped by this other religion under this name and this, and then that in turn gets translated into it, and it's just this. It's a nightmare. Someone needs to slap my hand and say, Kyl, stop.
Hey, but I mean, you come up with the good stuff, man.
Well, I want it to be as true as I can.
Right.
And
that's what I'm saying. You come up with the good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Cat Maria.
Why do the people in Annalise's town think she's a saint? It has to do with the whole religious fervor. There was the belief that previous to her, Annalise had a fixation on a saint named Barbara Wyers, something like that. I'm fuzzy on the last name because I'm old and senile. But there was a previous saint that had lived in Annalise's region, and Annalise had followed her, and that she believed that she was the modern reincarnation, so to speak, of the previous saint. And after Annalise went through all the exorcisms and all that, that same just kind of superstitious religious attitude that killed Annalise still has been perpetuated in her local. I mean, it's nothing more than a sad case. Anybody who give her any support or remembrance of this beautiful little girl who was basically killed, I support. So if they want to make her a saint, cheers.
I agree with it. Lee, our wonderful Lee.
What do I think about past lives and incarnations? All right, I get myself in trouble with this one again, too. Honestly, we are nothing but matter and energy. And I don't know that reincarnation is what it's made out to be directly. I think of it more as we're an echo. Maybe our energy pattern is an echo of a previous energy pattern that has been here before. It's not the same energy pattern. It follows the similar path. And so maybe the energy that was once hear from another individual still persist, and maybe ours is just similar to it, and so there's a crossover. Or then, there's the complete other opposite thought. The complete opposite thought is that it isn't reincarnation at all. If you think again about the parallel world ideas, that probably means that there's a version of us possibly in some of these parallel worlds. So in other words, our brains are on the same frequency. It's wired to ourselves so that we're actually picking up something from another existence that someone very similar to us has had or has, because time doesn't matter.
That's interesting. I never thought of that. I know you love talking about the government.
I would have to say that the government, just like private researchers, is constantly trying to follow leads. They're constantly trying to get as much information about as many things as they can. However, a government in and of itself is not an efficient way to gather information and to gather evidence. And even if they do, they are in a situation where they have secrets. And some of that's necessary. So governments may have extra information that they haven't espoused to us. Some of it's to protect our sensibilities. Some of it's because it makes a darn good cover story. If you have an Air Force base where people believe there are UFOs there and they're going to storm it, that makes a darn good cover for when that new futuristic fighter craft needs to be tested from another Air Force base in the area. There's a lot of reasons to keep the paranormal hype going, depending on how you define it. And Bigfoot has rights too.
Oh no, that's another story. Oh my goodness. I agree with you on that. I think they cover up. I think they, let out what wants to be out. And no, guys, I won't be running Area 51. Sorry. I think Kyle's going to stay home too on that one.
Yeah, I'm home for that one. Actually, I'm not home for it. I think I'm in Belgium or someplace.
Oh, well, that's right. You're headed out.
Yeah, I have 2 trips to Belgium in the next month, and one to the Bahamas, and one to, I think I'm going to Luxembourg. So yeah, I'm staying busy.
All right, guys, I'm going to post Kyle's website on here. Kat, if you need any kind of pointers or anything like that, this is his website, or get in contact with me or him on Facebook. And that's it right there. Right, Kyle?
There's an S. Last gasps.
Oh, let me hide that and read it. I'm always screwing something up. There we go. Last gasps.
Yeah, that's your breath. Last
sorry, I was reading there real quick. Thought somebody had a question there. Be respectful. If you all know anybody, try to debunk. You all are investigators out there. Debunk as much as possible. Get as much of it. And if at any chance you have to call him, the man's always busy, but he's there for anybody that truly needs it. So
unfortunately, I take calls 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and get.
Yeah, we had to stop a podcast last time just because we had a phone call that you thought you had to take off. But that's his website. This is Kyl Cobb. He is the man to me because I love listening to him. And you can see him at Scarefest. That is the 12th, 13th, and 14th.
Yep.
In Lexington, Kentucky at Rupp Arena Heritage Hall. You can catch him sometimes at Ghost Hunt Weekends at some of the shows. He loves coming over there. And you can get on there, www.ghosthuntweekends.com.
Particularly the Thomas House.
Yes, and he loves the Thomas House. He's got a book. Don't you have a book about the Thomas House?
Yeah, we do.
Yes, and he's an author. And I didn't pick up those books like I said I was going to pick up the books during your walk around. I'm an idiot. You're an idiot. That's my echo. But Kyle, go ahead and show the one that you got beside you.
La,
there you go, guys. Ghost and Demons, The Lost Things. And there's
Big.
that's the big book. There's a smaller book. He does one for the Bell Witch. That's interesting. And we actually got one of the special ones. It's actually got colorings and pictures and stuff like that in it.
Bios of the Tennessee Wraith Chasers.
Yeah, there you go, with bios with TWC in them. Kat, you can go to, is it on Amazon and
Amazon, Barnes and Noble.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble? You can get his book. If not, you can't have mine. I gotta have mine. But if y'all want to, friend Kyle, he's, follow him everywhere he goes. He's all over he's been to more countries than the United States has states.
59 countries. Number 60 is next weekend.
And you've studied how many religions?
22 different religions.
And that's personally going to them, right?
Yeah, or going back in the case of the ancient Greek religions and reading texts, or learning to read hieroglyphics for Egyptian. So yeah.
Yeah, but that's fascinating to me. Where can you? I'm stumbling for words on that. That's just wild. But that's it for the night, guys. Everybody wish Kyle a nice night, and hopefully he gets some good sleep tonight.
A few hours of research.
Oh, do you have a few hours of research?
Always.
All right, guys, this is it. I'll tell you what. Let's head on out of here with some music and tell Mr. Kyl Cobb that we enjoyed him. And we shall see him later. Like I said, www.ghosthuntweekends.com. If you want to see this again or go through the very first part, www.paranormalhighways.net. Our Facebook and Twitter is on there. Go on there, like, subscribe. And wow, we could have some more moments. Next week, we got the another one that's going to be a scare fest is the my gypsy chicks is what I call them. Southern gypsies. That's who it was. They're going to be out there. Hopefully they'll be across from us again, Kyle. They were fire. They were a fire then, boys. They're fun. But as soon as I get my tongue-tied stuff all out there, I'll be all right a little bit. But I appreciate everybody coming in, sharing, and all the questions that you all have. Love you guys. Thank you so much. And always and forever, stay spooky, my friends.